about tired of talking about rocks. Well, I say that this is going to kind of segue from rocks into the next subject, so we're still going to kind of talk about rocks some. Anyway, um, so I've been talking about rocks, radiometric dating, and the flaws and fallacies and all that. I want to move on to a long, long conversation that really has no end. But I don't plan on taking it on forever, but it may feel that way. But let's delve into what so many like to lean on as a topic for this is why I don't believe in God, evolution. This is really where we've been going with this the whole time. The theory of evolution, and the title itself, people get so bogged down in on both sides of the conversation because people on the non-science side of it, and I'm not trying to pit God against science because you don't have to choose one or the other. Let me go back and touch on that again because it's been a while. It's not that you have to choose God or science, because it's not that. God wrote science. God created the laws of science. He is science. It's not one or the other. It's such a bad dichotomy. But people who don't know science or don't want to study and understand science so often, I kind of lost my train of thought here. Well, I'll find it on one. People who don't understand science and don't understand the definitions of scientific terms go into this whole the theory of evolution is just a theory, and that's it. And they get hung up on the term theory and want to dismiss it based on that. Yes, the term scientific theory carries more weight than just the word theory. I will grant that. However, people on the other side of it want to take the term scientific theory and make it carry more weight than it actually does because, well, it's been accepted for so many years, and it's a couple hundred years, and there's been all this peer review and all this other stuff to it, and so they want to take the term scientific theory and make it seem like it's actual proven factual law. It's not. So, where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us in a big gray area where certain people want to go to one side of the spectrum, certain people want to go to the other side of the spectrum, and the term itself doesn't really live on either end of the spectrum. It lives in the gray area where evidence is trying to point to something, and we have to make that evidence tell the story, and we just don't have enough. We don't have enough evidence or enough intermediate information to tie that evidence together to actually give us a full story. So we can't take what we don't have and tie all that evidence together to say creation is the absolute truth or to say evolution is the absolute truth. We don't have what we need to tie all that together. Plain and simple. You cannot get to evolution is absolute truth. You cannot get to creation is absolute truth. Or other options, because those are not the only two options that are available. Those are just the only two that you ever hear anybody talk about. There's just not enough there. You cannot definitively prove. So you end up with all these conversations and all this evidence that can be arranged to fit either narrative. And it really, truly can. All of the evidence that people use to support evolution can be arranged to also support creation, and it just depends on how you massage the evidence and align it as to which one it supports, and you're going to agree with the one that you are most worldview driven to agree with. That's just how it's going to work. So, I'm already going long. Didn't intend to do that. So, what I want to talk about right now, and I'm going to really try to blow through this quick and wrap it up. Theory of evolution is introduced by Charles Darwin. It started off really gaining momentum when he writes his book, and his book really centers on uh, the finches in the Galapagos Islands. He realizes that the finches have a different beak structure than the ones back home in England, and he realizes that even during different seasons, their beak structure changes somewhat because their food source changes. And he realizes that their beaks are shorter and harder because their food source is harder to get to, and so that they've had to adapt to get to this harder to reach food source. And so what he's seeing and documenting is a species that has adapted to its environment. So this adaptation he is calling evolution. It is microevolution. Uh, that has been documented. It has been studied. It has been, I'm not going to say replicated because we haven't caused it to happen necessarily, but we have watched it happen over and over, and we have documented it. Microevolution is real. We have seen it. Species adapt to their environment. There's no question about that. Even Christians have seen it, believe it. That's not an issue. The problem is that we then take microevolution and we use that to prop up macroevolution. One species becoming another species, which has never been seen anywhere in the entire fossil record. It is not, has not, and will not be proven at any time. I do not believe it doesn't exist. But that's where it began, and then it becomes this thing where evolution starts to talk about we all came from a common ancestor. And that common ancestor had to have gone all the way back to a beginning. Well, that beginning had to have been one beginning life that had to have started from nothing. And I'm butchering this, and I apologize. But just to try to get to the point, and I'll get more in depth later on. But anyway, the original origin of the species, or not the species, but the original origin of life idea was that we all came from this primordial ooze. That in the beginning of time, billions and billions of years ago, the earth was formed and all this rain came and it just mixed with this mud and this ooze and this radiation from the sun because there was no real atmosphere, and all these things came together and created this soup, and there was no life, but there was just all of these things and all this stuff mixed together, and all this sludge and whatever, and energy from the sun that wasn't being blocked, and it was just this continual process, whatever. And suddenly, life just happened in this ooze. And that life, that single-celled organism thing, began to replicate rapidly, or whatever the case. And then it became a multi-celled organism, and then it rose up out of the goo, and it got up, and it walked, and eventually became man. And then, about 200 years ago, Louis Pasteur disproved that in his laboratory. And so when he disproved that, all of a sudden, evolutionists are like, well, crap, the origin of life is disproven. Well, now we got to figure out how it could have happened. So they start racing to figure out, well, primordial ooze isn't the case, so where did the origin of life happen? And in the last roughly 200 years, they can't figure it out. They can't go to anywhere. They can't think of anything. And here's the thing. That's the only place it could have happened. life had to originate from non-life. There had to have been a point where life wasn't, and then life was. And it had to have been non-life giving way to life, and they can't get there. And so rather than going, well, the creation story says God, our story says impossible, we can't find any other possible answers than impossible or God. So what did the evolution community do? They said, we're just going to stop trying to answer that question, and that's no longer part of the evolution conversation. So they just took the origin part of the equation and said, that's not part of evolution anymore. Where life originated is not even an evolution subject. We're just going to toss that aside, and we're going to talk about how the living things that we have seen and know about from the past have become these other things, and origin is just, we're not going to talk about that anymore. It's just under the rug, and and then I'll talk about it. And if you try to bring that up to an evolutionist who has done any kind of study and knows about the disproving of the primordial ooze and of the race to try to find a different origin story and all this stuff, if you talk to somebody who realizes all of the problems that cannot be addressed, then their answer to you is going to be, evolution doesn't deal with origin. Origin's a whole different study of science. That's abiogenesis. That's not what we do. And I may have mispronounced it. I don't know. I've read it. I don't know that I've ever actually heard it said, but that's what you run into. Is evolution says, oh, well, our stuff's disproven, so we're not going to admit that we might be wrong. We're just going to take what we have been disproven on and go, well, we're not going to talk about that anymore, and we're going to continue to misrepresent all this other stuff that hasn't been completely debunked yet. And every time something is debunked, we're going to throw it away, and we're going to continue on with this other crap. And when it gets debunked, we're going to throw it away, and we're going to continue on with this other crap. And we're just going to keep throwing crap at you, and when you debunk it, we're going to throw it away, and we're going to keep throwing other crap at you. Like the apes at the zoo that we believe that we came from, we're just going to keep throwing crap at you. And that is essentially the evolution discussion. So if you're going to get into this discussion with people, be prepared. You're going to have crap thrown at you. So, not where I was going to go with this, but that is basically the conversation we're going to have. And I'm going to prepare you for the crap you're going to get thrown at you. We'll talk more about this later. Have a good one.